Thank you very much for your kind introduction. British Airways did much better than Lufthansa because they didn't go at all because they were on strike. So it was a smart move to take British Airways. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I would recommend when I make the presentation, just interrupt me with your questions or critical remarks or remarks at all, because I think that's more lively for both of us. There are many numbers and figures in my presentation. I won't go into details because that would be quite boring for you. I think you are provided the presentation afterwards. So it's easier to have a real conversation together. So I made some notes about the discussions before. We can go into this afterwards because I think there have been touched many points which are similar in Austria and in Vienna as well. I would suggest that we get closer to the real work of a destination management organization like ours. But for the beginning, I would recommend to have a broader view on what is a destination, what makes a destination relevant. Actually, that's what we do. We try to make our destination relevant in the world. And I come from Vienna, a city with a big history. So we are very much also on the scientific level into history. And I brought you a little film which shows in historical context what made destinations important and relevant. And of course, it's the people. It's not so much the buildings. Of course, the buildings, it's a consequence out of it, but it's the people. Important people, talents, and a little bit it's the same situation we face nowadays. And this film was made by a German professor, Maximilian Schich. He's teaching on the University of Texas, and he had a look on history where important people were born and where they died, and why did they die elsewhere and not at the place they were born. That's attracting talents, going to other places, sometimes voluntarily, but sometimes you're forced to move somewhere else. And I would start with this movie because I think that's really a good entry for our discussion.
The great Renaissance artist Leonardo da Vinci was born near Florence. Known throughout Europe, he was employed by the King of France late in his life. He died in Amboise in the Loire. Da Vinci is one of over 100,000 notable people whose birthplaces and deathbeds have been mapped in this animation. It's the work of a team led by Maximilian Schich, based at the University of Texas. The team wanted to chart hundreds of years of culture. Births are blue, deaths are red. Let's start in the Far East. This is 17th century Japan, just opening up to the west. Many of these names are Christian missionaries to the country, some persecuted here for their faith. In 19th century Australia, migration from Europe increases the traffic. If you watch this full screen, you might make out some names, among them the infamous bushranger Ned Kelly, born in the 1850s. His father was Irish, transported to Australia for stealing pigs. Back in time now to the Roman Empire. There goes Galen, physician and surgeon, on his way from Greece to settle in Rome. The powerful Roman Empire drew learned people in from all over Europe and beyond. Cultural subcentres began to emerge, like Cordoba in Spain and Paris and Avignon in France. From the 12th century onwards, all roads no longer lead to Rome. Migrations between other places are common. It's a little like a map of budget airline destinations. As time goes on, we can see that Paris attracts far more cultural migrants than other French cities. Whereas in Germany, several centres compete evenly for migrants' attention. Even small towns can be attractive cultural centres. Look at the Côte d'Azur in southern France, popular since the late 19th century. These data are from freebase.com, a catalogue of well-known people and places owned by Google. In the 1600s, many European-born explorers looked west, striking out to the Americas. Among them, a fur trader originally from the English countryside, governors from Spain and France looking after islands in the West Indies, and military men. These are early settlers and military folk. You might recognise some of these names. On the left, there goes John Washington, great-grandfather of George Washington, the first President of the United States. John was born in Essex, England. The trend was to move from the rural European countryside to the burgeoning cities of the US, Boston, New York, Washington, hosts to more deaths in red than births in blue. But that starts to change. Look at all the blue now, as people build communities and the population on the East Coast expands. Most often people move into and along river valleys. From the 18th century onwards, gradually, look how people are starting to move to the West Coast and living out their days there. That little cluster on the coast is San Francisco. Transport links make it easier to get from one coast to the other. First trains, and then affordable cars. Around the 1920s, there are still more births than deaths on the East Coast. Notable people begin to flock to Meccas like Hollywood in Los Angeles. This depiction makes clearer the pull of the West Coast cultural centres, where people move during their lifetimes. And many well-known names look for a haven for their twilight years. Next, the team would like to look at how Enlightenment thinking and the religious landscape overlap with their cultural maps.
So for me, the consequence of this film is, do you have enough blue and reds in your city? Are you attractive for talents? Are you attracting people from all over the world? Or not? It has to do with relevance, and I think that's a very broader example. So, into the presentation. You probably know, city tourism is booming worldwide. So, again, for Vienna, we have the best year ever, again this year, and we will have more than 13 million overnight stays, only in the hotels in Vienna. But still the situation is quite volatile, so we don't know what's going on right now. We have some crisis not far away from Vienna, 500 kilometers from Vienna is Ukraine. So Middle East, you name it. So this symbolizes a little bit, in my opinion, the situation. So we still have our colored poodles, and we are very happy with our work, but we don't know what's happening in the back. So, but probably have to get used to this situation. You and we experienced the financial crisis in 2009. So until then, city tourism was booming, one high after the other, but suddenly it was a complete breakdown. So city tourism is the motor of tourism development, but it's also very vulnerable. And we are talking about leadership as well, and I think just to show a little bit my idea what's important about the environment of leadership nowadays. So that's sounds a little bit like consultancy esoterics, but I think it makes quite clear what it's about. It's life is unstable. Life is strenuous, life is exhausting, everything changes every day. So we cannot nowadays say something is given for eternity, because everything changes every day. So these are this Some people say the VUCA world. It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So we have to deal with all these influences. The environment doesn't make our work and our personal life easier. I don't believe in simple answers to complicated questions. So that's what our life is about. So professional life, also private life, is strenuous. We have all the discussion, it was mentioned before, Generation Y, and you find your real personality and everything. Yes, still, life is changing, and when you have a broader approach to this, maybe you know the Austrian economist Schumpeter. He was always talking about the positive destruction. So everything you build up is at a certain point destructed by somebody else or by yourself, should be done. That's the basis for innovation. And that looks very scary, actually, but I think that's a normal situation we have to face. There's a saying, what's the difference between a German and an Austrian? The German would say the situation is serious but not hopeless, and the Austrian would say the situation is hopeless but not serious. So maybe the latter approach is sometimes easier in your life. Going into tourism, just a few numbers, what it means global. I want to point out one important thing when we look at the labor market. The jobs in tourism industry, they are not transferable to cheaper markets. I think that's very important. It's a very important thing we always stress when we talk to politicians. So the jobs created in tourism, they cannot be transferred to Turkey or to China or somewhere else. They are really based in your destination. I think that's a very important thing as well. You see the figures, it's an export industry. It's a real export industry. I think that's also very important. A little comforting thing for us in Europe, even in 2030, Europe will be the biggest market for tourism worldwide. So you see other areas, Asia Pacific especially, growing and growing, but still Europe will be the biggest market for tourism.
Do you think that's anything to do with the euro and how we've all come together to work together over the last 10 years, or is that the trend that's going to be present anyway?
You mean Europe?
Yeah.
I think there are several opinions on that. So some global economists say that Europe will be a retiring home for the rest of the world. But I personally don't think so, because many trends, many lifestyle trends, many economic trends still come from Europe. And when you look at the lifestyle things with all the implications and complications like in Asia, because the European or North American lifestyle is the lifestyle people want to have. That's not always very healthy for their economies and their environment especially. But we are still the content machine. So I really believe that it's not only about a retiring home, Europe. I think, of course, the growing together always helps. Bring together markets and making markets or regions more accessible. And of course, a common currency helps on the continent, that's clear. Because when you experience yourself when you travel and you have 10 wallets because you travel one region, it's not so easy sometimes.
You also mentioned it's an export. The other thing is it's an export that attracts VAT, which is 20%. Exports are VAT-free, but tourism
Yes. Yeah.
That's a considerable amount of money.
Yeah. So still more than 50% leisure, recreation, holidays. Visiting friends and relatives, very important in Edinburgh, I think. It's included in your numbers, in your figures. Business professional, not specified, 7%. Here, no. Okay, that's what I wanted to do. No, can I go back with the presentation with the upper button? Oh, it's still. Computer says no. Okay. A global approach as well. In 2012, for the first time, there were more than 1 billion international arrivals worldwide. So that was the first time in history that we had more than 1 billion, and 47% are in cities. And this is growing. You know that urbanization is one of the mega trends in the world, so more than 50% living in agglomerations meanwhile. And normally city tourists are people living in cities as well. It has to do with connectivity with airlines. Cities are connected. Cities are getting more and more important very often, more important than nations. So nations become very important in the case of crisis, like now Russia, Ukraine, or in this field. But economic-wise or exchange-wise, it's about the cities now. And I brought you some slides to show you how the growth in cities and nations is different. So city tourism, not only in Austria, but all over the world actually, is a motor for tourism. And if you look at this, Spain, you see the development. The blue line is the development of overnight stays in Spain from 2004 to 2013. And the red line is Bilbao. Probably you know the Bilbao effect with the Guggenheim Museum and everything. So you see the difference in the growth. The same for Germany. You know Berlin, booming city touristic-wise right now. And you see the development of Germany and Berlin in comparison. Of course, Austria, same picture. Probably when you think of tourism in Austria, you think of mountains, skiing. But you see the growth in Vienna and the growth of Austria. So that's significant, meanwhile. To give you the figures, this year we had an increase of overnight stays. We only count hotel stays. We don't count staying with friends and relatives. We only count overnight stays in commercial establishments. Plus 5.7%. Vienna is a state. We have 9 states in Austria. It's a state as well, city and state. Plus 5.2%. Austria minus of 1.3%. If you exclude the cities of the whole Austrian result, it's minus 2.3. Had to do with the bad weather conditions. I think you were on the lucky side this year in summer. You had a good summer. We had an awful summer, but this is so city tourism is not so affected by the weather actually. In general, it means we up to August, we had 8.7 million overnight stays in the hotels, which means plus 6.4%. We are a small country, 8 million inhabitants, so 82% of our bed nights are international. This is one of the top rates in Europe, of course. Has to do with a small domestic market. German cities are completely different. They are the other way around. So I think Berlin, they have 30% international overnight stays and 70% domestic stays. So that means that our organization needs to be more international, more outgoing actually. Our top markets, Germany, Austria, US, Italy, Russia, Great Britain, they are doing fine. We suffer a little bit of Russia right now. Russia was our 3rd most important market last year, after Germany and Austria. Normally the US were the 3rd most important market for us, but last year was Russia. Now we're facing severe losses in Russia. So the numbers for September are minus 24%. Not only because of the crisis, the political crisis, but also because of the weak economy. The weak ruble, it's an all-time low for the ruble. The same thing currency-wise is true for Japan. The yen is very weak right now. And that's very important because we have to consider that tourism industry is always a mirror side to global developments. We are always, it's a sort of Stockholm syndrome because we have to play a role in this. We cannot get hysterically about it, but we face this crisis and we have to deal with it in a way. So we are on the Russian market still. We are in a very calm way there without hysterical actionism, but we are there just to show our partners, okay, we are there for you. But we always have to deal with these situations. And in this year, we have the best result from the US, the best result since since the year 2000. That means that only now we overcame 9/11 and the financial crisis for the US market. So it's a lot. You need to have a long breath to work on the market, to work the market in a sustainable way. Just about some things about Vienna. It's capital of Austria, 1.7 million inhabitants. Accessible from every European city within 3 hours. It's number one when it comes to flights into the CEE region. 8,000 startup companies a year. The R&D rate is 3.95%. The EU average is 2%, and the GDP is 44,000 euro per capita. And you see in comparison the other figures. Kenneth, you mentioned at the beginning a definition of destination. It was very much focused on touristic infrastructure. We have a more holistic approach to destination. Destination is a place to live, is a place to visit, is a place to make business, and it should be a place to be happy as well. So we were discussing before in the questions what is necessary for tourism in a city. So sometimes I'm provocative. I say what we need for tourism is a hotel, public toilets, and some language skills, and some services on an international level. The rest should be done for the population of the city when we talk about city tourism. So because we really believe that only a city which is good to its inhabitants is good to its visitors. We try not to separate this. It's not a question what makes a tourist happy. Tourists are happy when they have this feeling of being a local. We are all experiencing this. I always call it the postmodern break. So there are 1 billion tourists all over the world, and nobody wants to be a tourist. Because when we travel, we are never tourists. We are visitors, and we want to experience how the people live there, and we see the developments on Airbnb and everything. So sharing economy. I think that's unreversible. I have discussion with my hoteliers, and they are not so happy about it, but we have to find a way to deal with it, because this idea of live like a local for a short time will be very prominent. Whether it's a true image of a destination or not, but this is a very strong will people have. Back to Vienna, quality of life, that's the important thing. If you're good to your people, you're good to tourists. Quality of life. Number one, Mercer, a London-based consultancy. State of the World Cities, UN Habitat, it's a city organization of the United Nations. What does it mean? It means how sustainable is a city community. Not only ecological-wise, but also how do people live together. It's about social inclusion. Are you in the position to take part in the city's life also if you don't have a lot of money? Or are you locked out? So, and this was part of this survey. And so Vienna was ranked number one, that the wealth is very balanced, so that the city is very inclusive. I met a few months ago Tyler Brûlé. He was the founder of Wallpaper magazine. And he was in Vienna and asking how is it, and he said he went to a coffee house, and for the first time for a long time he saw old people, young people, wealthy people, not so wealthy people, educated people, not so educated people, sitting together in one room, which is not so common anymore, because I read in a presentation before the boosting thing, you know, cities are boosting and are superlatives and everything. And in this situation, cities tend to be very segregated. Rich people, the educated people, the uneducated people, they have all their neighborhoods. And obviously, Vienna succeed in bringing or trying to bring together all those influences. Global City Index, A.T. Kearney, a consultancy from Chicago, they had what I think is an interesting approach, what makes a metropolis. So we all know what is a big city, what makes a metropolis. So they went into cosmopolitic questions. How many international headquarters are there? How is the cultural exchange? How multicultural is a city? And in this ranking, Vienna is ranked number 5 in Europe. It's, of course, after London, Paris. What's your guess? The other ones? No. Brussels, of course, political centers. And Madrid. Our friends from Barcelona will not like this, but it was Madrid. And then it was Vienna. So Vienna was a surprise for us. Vienna was ahead of cities like Hamburg or Munich or Zurich, which are much smaller than Vienna, but with a strong economic growth and power. So bringing together, that makes a metropolis. Tourism adds 4% of Vienna gross regional product. It's not so much, actually. Because like in every big city, the service industry is the biggest normally, it's 80%. But in general, it's not an unhealthy situation. If a city depends only on tourism, it's economic-wise unhealthy, and it's unhealthy for the development, because then we have the situation that things are done for tourists. Only for tourists. And the cities in Europe which depend mostly on tourism, they are not the wealthiest, actually. It's Berlin, it's Rome, with severe economic problems. So this mix is actually quite healthy. We would be happy if we came up to 6% or so, but right now other sectors are growing faster than tourism in Vienna right now. So, but and if you compare to Austria, it's 14%. So there are states in Austria which depend heavily on tourism. So just a few remarks on the Vienna Tourist Board. It's a private body under public law. So we are not part of the city government, of the city administration. Founded in 1955. What's our mission? Promotion tourism in Vienna, worldwide marketing, visitor service in the city. It's sometimes complicated because we see ourselves as advocate to the guests as well. That means we have to get into discussions with the industry sometimes, with the local industry. Because we see ourselves as advocate for the guests and say, okay, there is room for improvement. Destination management, that's very important. We were talking about this before. It's the two big points. It's about destination marketing and destination management. And you are all the destination where you come from. Nobody owns a destination. Nobody owns a brand. It's not true that if we said we own the brand Vienna, cities and regions are uncontrollable, and that's good. Let's make them interesting. But we are all our destination. Right at this moment, even I myself am part of the destination Edinburgh, because I go back home and tell people how it was. So it's not only about a DMO, it's only normally a very tiny mosaic stone, what we contribute. But it's all of us which contribute to a destination. We work on a non-profit basis, and that means that we have this whole advantage, a big advantage and privilege to be neutral. I come to this later on. What does it mean? So our budget, we are funded by a local accommodation tax. It's 100% which goes to us. That's different from other cities where nobody knows how much, which percentage of the accommodation tax goes really to tourism marketing. And that's why we have a huge commitment of the hotel industry in Vienna, because they know, okay, every cent they or the visitor pay goes to tourism marketing. That's different from other cities like Berlin, Hamburg, or Munich, where the rate is sometimes 5%, city tax is 5%, but nobody knows how much is going to touristic marketing. The organization, content management, production, it's the whole online sector, market media, their global public relations, and the global work with the travel industry is done. Vienna Convention Bureau, Vienna is amongst number 3 when it comes to international conventions worldwide. Visitor services, staff and finance, and strategic destination development, and brand management advertising. These are our markets, 23 markets. Small domestic market, that's why we have to be very international. We sometimes work together with the Austrian National Tourist Board, but not always. Being the only big city in a small country is sometimes not easy when it comes to stakeholder management and everything. So, and in some markets, the brand Vienna is stronger than the brand Austria. So we take the brand Austria in our rucksack to promote Austria as well, because like in markets like China or in Japan, it's easier to go on the market with Vienna than with Austria. Has to do with a certain situation that we don't have so many global brands you can align to in an image transfer. You know any Austrian global brand?
Red Bull.
Red Bull. Swarovski. And interesting wise, they don't consider themselves as Austrian brands. They don't consider themselves Austrian brands. They're based in Austria, but they don't consider themselves. So when we talk about promotion, when I go to Japan or China, especially China, so my colleagues from Berlin, they go there and they say, you know, Berlin, made in Germany. It's BMW, Audi, Porsche. Everybody knows what he means. If my colleague from Zurich goes there, he would say, okay, you know, Swiss made, Rolex. If I went there and said, Red Bull, okay, it's a sweet drink. Not so healthy probably as well. That's it. So we have to put more efforts in our DNA. So for Vienna, music always helps. Because our city of music. There are much more things a part of music, but this is always the gate opener. So again, global public relations marketing campaigns on offline. We do a lot of content marketing. We don't do big advertising campaigns. I don't think that's sustainable, because we don't have the money for huge advertising campaigns in all markets. So we do content marketing. What's that? Actually, it's events with content which is relevant to Vienna. It's very often it's cuisine, it's wine growing, it's coffee house, and of course classical institutions like the opera or so. I show you some examples afterwards. Online is getting more and more important. You see this. Only I want to stress out one number. The mobile use of our homepage is 106%, had a 106% increase. That's a global trend. You will know that. We offer our information online in 13 languages. You see Twitter, Facebook, 500,000 Facebook fans. We have no idea if this will be of any value in 5 years. It could be gone. It will be replaced by something else, but we have to do it. I come back to the first slide. You know, it's this volatile thing. Everything can change every day. So now you have to do Facebook. Now you have to Twitter, but what's in 5 years? But it's without an alternative right now. So we do it. And we all have the privilege of living in an era where there's a technical revolution going on. That means that we do many mistakes. Probably we do many things wrong, in the wrong way. We've seen 10 or 20 years. So in 20 years, we will laugh about many things we do nowadays. But that's normal, that's history. That's again without an alternative, because we need to do it now. And we need to make our mistakes. It's very important to have a culture of doing things in the wrong way. So, and just that's Eurovision Song Contest, because events, convention, movies are getting more and more important. We had a conversation before about the festivals in Edinburgh, which are a real brand. So Edinburgh is known for its festivals worldwide. So we are proud that we host the Eurovision Song Contest next year, but we also host a high number of international congresses, especially medical congresses. We just had 18,000 diabetes scientists in Vienna. That's a big, but not the biggest conference we have. It has to do, again, with the strong sector of universities. The medical university in Vienna is one of the highest ranked in the world, so they bring a lot of business for us as well. And I was talking before about content marketing, so talking about relevant things from Vienna and showing them as well in a very innovative way. So you can talk about opera in a very old-fashioned way, or you can talk about opera in a very modern way. And we try, of course, to speak about classical music, classical culture in a very modern way, because it's always how you present it. It's not always what you say, but how you do it. So there are some words which are forbidden in our marketing. It's cool. So because at the moment you claim that you are cool, you're the uncoolest thing ever. Charming is the next thing. Charming. It's the most uncharming thing to say we are charming. Because you are charming, you are not charming. So we try to do it in a good way and to bring the message by doing this in a good way. And that's a short medley I brought to you about some of our activities this year. Okay, hopefully it works. Yes. I have to apologize, it's in German, because we just took it from our press conference. This was entering a new market, South Korea, for us. And we are making schnitzels with media and travel industry. In Moscow, a coffee house, very important for us, coffee house. That's an inclusive concept, because retired people made a coffee house for us. So elderly people were baking and preparing coffee for guests. This was a project for the Austrian market. And they were talking with the audience, coming to Vienna, what are their tips, what should they do? We are the only touristic partner of Art Basel. We host a lounge in the collector's lounge there. always working with Viennese or Viennese designers and artists. So only a few activities of this year, and this is also to do with a lack of money actually. So that's not cheap what we do, but it's much cheaper than just spending money on advertising. That's very often a thing to make stakeholders happy. You have one ad in the New York Times and show it to your board, and they say, "Oh, great, we're in the New York Times." It's nothing, you know. You can simply burn the money as well for one ad in the New York Times. Sorry? Contact. Oh, it's about media work. It's about media coverage. Whatever we do, it's accompanied by a huge media coverage activity. It's about contact rates. And we made one study about 2 activities in Barcelona and in Hamburg, so which was a study of its own. What was the result in triggering a visit to Vienna, and so we try to evaluate it. But the main currency is media coverage. Actually, it's about media coverage. We wouldn't do this. It's nice to have 3,000 people in a coffee house, but it's would be not enough if you pay a lot of money for that. So you need the media coverage. It's about relevance and media coverage. So, okay, now a short step to destination marketing and development. We too have a concept 2020, which was just presented 2 weeks ago. You can find it online as well. We showed the link afterwards. When I try to explain my job or the job of my team, I would say we are sort of shop window decorators. We are the curators of a destination. When we talk about destination marketing, we are the ones to decide what's in the shop window. And the shop window can look like this, or it can look like this. So that doesn't mean that this is bad. This is very necessary as well. But when you see a destination like a shop, you have to prepare your shop window in the way that people would come in and say, "Oh, that's beautiful. Let's have a look in there." But as soon as they're in the shop, you can offer everything you have. So before it was the question came up about a growing institution. Should every institution grow? Every touristic institution grow? Many offers, many companies, small companies are charming because they are small. They will normally not make it in the shop window, but they will make it on a shelf, on a very prominent shelf inside the shop. And that's a constant discussion we have with our stakeholders. Why is not my hotel on the front page? Because say, okay, that's good, we love your product, it's a lot of work you do, but probably it's not the reason why people come to a city. People come to a city for other reasons, and then they need a hotel, or Airbnb, or a hostel. But normally there are few hotels in the world, few institutions in the world, where people would say, okay, I have to stay one day, I have to stay there. What do you think, for instance? What do you say, which is a hotel where you would say, okay, I have to stay there once in my life?
Peninsula.
Sorry?
Peninsula in Hong Kong.
Yes. For me, it's the Copacabana Palace in Rio. So but this is really seldom, you know. There are not so many hotels in the world. So that's why we have to put the destination first. And then we have to put the most attractive, most relevant things first. That doesn't mean that we don't like the others. They're as important for a destination like a Park Hyatt hotel or an Imperial hotel in Vienna. But it depends on where it can be found. It's our job that every offer can be found. So there we have to be neutral with this. But this is our approach. It's like a shop window. But trust us, and we need to work for this trust of our stakeholders, that we put the best things and the most relevant things in the shop window. Because when we put the wrong things in the shop window, nobody will profit of it. And that's our approach to city marketing as well. And then, of course, destination development, management. What is politics doing for tourism? I think there's one notion amongst politicians. Tourism happens anyway, which is not true, of course. I see my role a little bit as a seismograph. This is a word in English as well, seismograph. When we talk to politics, and we talk often to politics, and they're quite open most of the time in theory. We say, okay, we can tell you what's necessary for a successful destination. When we talk about expanding Vienna Airport, accessibility is a huge issue for all of us, for all destinations, and especially flight connections. If you give a halt to the expansion of the Vienna Airport because of environmental issues, because of complaints of neighbors or so, the politicians have the right to do it. But if you do it on Monday, please don't complain on Tuesday that Vienna is not again under the first 3 convention centers in the world. So just see the consequences. Politicians are elected. I'm not elected. They have the power, and they have the right to use this power. They should only know about the consequences. Taxes, the same issue in Vienna. We always talk about taxes, the bad quality of taxes. It's a very similar discussion all over the world. So what we try to give sceneries, show you, okay, if you do this, maybe if you're lucky, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. But you are responsible for the consequences. And don't complain afterwards that something is happening.
But the reality is that politicians are transient. They come and they go, you know, and they have power without responsibility in the sense that they make a decision. Yeah. And then their party's out of power, but that still stands. Yeah. You're still there doing your job. That's the issue of politics.
There you see how mature a system is actually. Is a political system so mature that decisions which was made by a former government, if they are smart, are still made or are still kept or not.
But then the incoming government blames the outgoing government.
Of course.
Carries on doing it for 18 years, saying this is what Labour did.
Yes. But that's what we call stakeholder management. We have to deal with it. That's my job actually, to deal with it. And they have the right to make decisions because they're elected. And that's the basis of everything. And if, what I don't believe, if one day somebody says, we don't need any tourism at all, it's okay, you have the consequences of it. Which will not happen, of course, because nobody will say it like this. Maybe somebody is not caring for tourism, that he doesn't care or she doesn't care, but he would never say this. So it's a lot about stakeholder management, I would say. And what we're doing right now, attracting everyone was a note I made. I don't believe in this. You cannot be attractive for everyone. It's a very thin ice, and we Yet we didn't come to a point where we really know what's the trigger is for visiting Vienna. We made, a few years ago, a huge brand study. We asked 11,000 people all over the world, what's your imagination about Vienna? So the outcome was no surprise. The outcome was Vienna is seen as an imperial city, beautiful buildings, huge buildings, monumental, with a vibrant cultural life. It's one of the cultural hotspots in the world. Then was an interesting point, it was seen as the city of savoir-vivre. So having a good life. I would say Vienna is combining Northern European efficiency when it comes to infrastructure, to wealth, economic power with Southern European lifestyle. When it comes to being crazy for good food, growing its own wine. Vienna is the only wine-growing metropolis in the world. Coffee house culture, of course. So the good life. That was interesting for us because this point differentiates us the most from our competitors. Because London and Paris, they both have a royal and an imperial history and present. Cultural life, the same true for London and Paris. But there's only one cuisine in the world which is named after a city. It's a Viennese cuisine. There's no Parisian cuisine. There's no London cuisine. So this is the point which really differentiates us from others. The other points were more a communication thing, a PR thing. It's about the functioning city. It's a city which is safe and clean, which is one of the main currency in city tourism or in tourism in general. If you send out any signal which says we got a severe security problem in our city, or we got a severe cleanliness problem in our city or region, that's always a very complicated situation then. So Vienna is seen as a safe city and everything. But, and then as a green city was a surprise for us because it's a very dense city, but in overall it's 50% of the surface is green, 700 hectares of vineyards. But for us, what was a surprise? The last points, it's about, again, what I said before about charming and cool. You have to illustrate it when you talk to the people. So it's not enough to say, you know, my destination is very, very safe. So because every destination says it right now. Every destination is, you name it. Right now, every destination is creative, isn't it? Young. What else? You name it. There are so many expressions every destination uses. So when we talk about safety and security in the city, we say, okay, there's public transport 24 hours a day. And women use the underground at 3 in the morning alone, which is true. So that's, you have to find metaphors for bringing over the message. That's what we do. Okay, but this is, in my opinion, not enough. So we know what the people think about our destination, but we don't know what is the trigger. What makes them choose Vienna? What makes them press the button to come to Vienna? So that's why we started a study right now, together with a scientific institute in Munich. It's a neuroscience thing. It's quite complicated, actually. And we want to find out the motivation and the trigger why people come to Vienna. And on this we work right now. We will have the results in, I think, February. I'm very excited about this because so we made the basics. We know what the people think about the destination, but we don't know yet what makes them come. So we work on this, and maybe we can find a way to let you know afterwards. So back to destination development. So of course, this would be, forget about the brand. This would be the shop window we would imagine, actually, for destination. Vienna 2020. A lot of things were said about destination development, everything. It's what you see here is the baseline for our concept 2020. We thought the city competition is getting strong and strong. It is a global competition. It's not a European competition. It's not a competition of the north of the globe. Really not. So it's a global competition. And we thought, what makes a European old city? How it becomes an old European city, which is, by the way, the fastest growing city in Central Europe, which is one of the youngest cities in Europe. You know, our image is sometimes it's a curse and a blessing if you have such a strong image. We think European cities should be global, smart, and premium. What does it mean? I don't think that European cities can compete with the tallest high-rise building, the biggest shopping malls, or the biggest shark basin. So that's a job other cities do much better in other regions. So we should concentrate on what is our DNA as a European city. So we think that this global smart premium baseline shows it. For Vienna, we have a situation right now like 100 years ago. 50% of the population have a migrant background. 100 years ago, Vienna was the 5th biggest city in the world, more than 2 million inhabitants, and only 50% of them spoke German. The rest spoke Hungarian, Bulgarian, Czech, Romanian, Ukrainian. So it was, after New York, it was the most multicultural city in the world. Nowadays, Vienna is the 7th biggest city in Europe. It's not in any ranking of the biggest city in the world. We won't make this anymore. But that's not a problem. But again, there's a mindset of being in the heart, not only geographically, in the heart of Europe again. With immigration from Germany now, the biggest immigration group is Germany, because they come because of the good jobs and maybe also of the climate and the food. But this makes a city global, and the mindset a city has is a cosmopolitan mindset. Just here, culture makes a city global, of course, because exchanging talents, exchanging people. You know, every night 10,000 people go to a classical concert in Vienna. That's more than people go to a football game. It has not only to do with the quality of our football, but also international organizations, UNESCO World Heritage. I'm a little bit critical about that because we have constant discussions with them because they have a completely different approach to a growing city, to a modern city. I don't understand this approach. I don't think that one can say from this moment on, nothing has to be changed in the city. So why is a building from the 19th century automatically better than a modern building from the 21st century? That's a little bit the approach of UNESCO, but we work on this. And as mentioned before, vineyards, again, has to do with this issue of smart. Again, it's smart to have your own wine grown, actually. It has to do with environmental issues as well. It's a safe environment, it's a clean environment. Vienna is self-sustainable when it comes to vegetable. So these are messages we put into this whole concept. Not going too deep into this. Very important education. So that's, again, a very holistic approach to us. Nine universities. Vienna is the biggest university city in the German-spoken world. So 190,000 students living in the city. Very important for us because they are ambassadors. Many of them coming from abroad, going home or coming back or staying in the city. I mentioned before, public transport, again, issue in smart. So you see this 39% is the percentage of public transport amongst all the ways which are made in the city, the so-called modal split. It's the second highest percentage in Europe after Prague. So people are use public transport. And it's not, and using public transport is nothing for the poor people only. Because everybody uses it, because it's much more convenient. That's an important thing. It has, again, to do with being inclusive. Bike lanes, you name it. So we think a city should be global, should be intelligent. And when we talk about smart, it's not only about ecology. That's very important. A city is never natural. A city is the opposite of being natural. That's, in my opinion, is very often overseen. When we talk of smart, we always say Vienna is smart and glamorous. It's not a farm. This is when you see it at tourism marketing right now, destination marketing, sometimes you have the impression, okay, they are talking about a eco-friendly farm of a city. That doesn't work because a city is not natural. It can be green, it can be sustainable, it can be intelligent, but it's not natural. It has to do with culture as well. So I like the definition of city which says a city is dense. So it's a lot of influences together, buildings together. A city is hybrid. A lot of different lifestyles together, ethnic groups together, and a city has to be theatrical. It has to be bella figura, as Italians say, because cities show how the level of civilization is, because it's always shown how high the level of civilization is, you always see in the cities. And it's not an argument against the rural areas. That's very important because the rural areas are so important as well. But you should always know what's your DNA, and cities are not natural. Just a few other assets. I mentioned it before. So this is a basis we work on. When you find our concept in the net, you will see how we want to achieve it. But that's not enough. We saw before in the presentation, we need goals, we need objectives, and we have, of course, a quantitative goal as well, or actually 3 goals, 3 objectives. It has to do with our situation that we have extremely good statistics in Vienna. So we know, of course, the overnight stays in the hotel. We also know the turnovers in the hotel because of the city tax. So we can calculate the real turnover and revenue in the hotel industry. So these are 2 figures we have as a goal for 2020. And there's one figure, I think we are the first in Europe to do this. It has to do with accessibility. And there's a formula for this. Now, here. It's 5 times 400 plus 20 is 2020. It's a little spin, of course. What does it mean? In 2013, which was a record year for us, we had 13 million overnight stays in Vienna, only in the hotels. That 5 means that in 2020, we want to have 5 million more overnight stays in Vienna. That means 18 million overnight stays. The 400 is for the turnover, for the revenue in the hotel industry. We had 600 million euros turnover only in the hotels in Vienna. And we want to have plus 400 million. That means 1 billion revenue for the hotel industry. And the 20, this is for 20 new destinations where we want to have direct flights. So this is an objective, a goal we developed together with our airport. Of course, the regions are no secret. It's North America, it's South America, it's Europe and Asia. So you can figure out about which cities it is. So because we think that accessibility, connectivity is the key issue for us. And this we do together with the airport.
On that point, obviously Bratislava is
yes.
40 minutes drive from you.
Yeah.
From that perspective, do you capture that and understand obviously people are flying to Bratislava to visit Vienna and obviously vice versa? I imagine that's quite a challenge then if you're working with Vienna airport.
Yep.
You've got a very strong competitor literally just down the road from you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you work with Bratislava and the Slovakian bit as well to draw people into Vienna?
The importance of Bratislava Airport is shrinking actually right now because of the situation with the national carrier. There's no national carrier left. There was once an effort to take over the Bratislava Airport. So we have some low costers there like Ryanair, which would not come to Vienna because it's too expensive for them. We gratefully welcome passengers from Bratislava, but they are not part of our joint venture in this field, simply because of the relevance. And we see that in Prague as well, or Budapest. If you lose your national carrier, it's really a tough situation. So you really depend. We have this strong discussion with the Gulf carriers. I think it's Central Europe is more affected by the Gulf carriers than UK, because the Gulf carriers have one interest. They want to take over the business to Asia. And now we have another, so it started with Emirates and Qatar. Then it came Etihad. Now we have Turkish, which is a Star Alliance, a member. So volatile again. Nothing is true. It can change every day. No, but Bratislava is, it's a sister city of us, of course. It's the closest capitals in Europe, only 40, 50 kilometers. But we gratefully welcome the guests from Bratislava. So, I talked before about being only a small mosaic stone in the destination marketing. We all sell a destination. It's not only about a DMO. We all sell a destination. So celebrities, expats, politicians, science, movies, our guests, of course. I think that's always very important. I always tell my people, it's not only about us. So it's about the whole bunch of influences and partnering within a destination. And to end with, again, business school esoterics about leadership. Management is doing the right. Management is doing things right, and leadership is doing the right thing. Okay. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions and discussions, I'm ready for it. Thank you very much.